Warning, this video contains spoilers for each of the pieces of media I talk about. They're all notated as timestamps on the video play bar and in the description if you'd like to skip over any specific topic. With that out of the way, thank you, and enjoy the video. I'm stronger than Kirby. Let's begin with the obvious. What am I on about? I don't have any special powers, and surely neither do you. We're all normal humans with varying but limited degrees of power and ability. If stacked head-to-head with someone like Kirby, Goku, or Superman, there's no contest. None of us can even reach the pedestal that these guys are on. Ignoring that none of these examples would ever hurt a civilian, any fair fight with forces this powerful would be to our downfall. I don't care what Batman v Superman would have you believe. However, there's a catch now, isn't there? While we could speculate on MMA fights ahead of time expecting an inevitable outcome, there is no possibility of any of us fighting a character who simply isn't real. The answer of who would win is so obvious, nobody because it's not possible, that no one would even bring it up. There's no reason to ruin the fun. Except, I love ruining the fun. There's nothing I do better and you can't take that away from me. So that's it. You can't power scale you based on fictional characters because you can't interact with them, right? Wrong! I'd argue that the nature of media is the interactivity between us in the real world and the characters and narrative of a fictional or past world. Thus, when we read a Superman comic or watch the new episode of Dragon Ball, it's us peering into a space that we cannot ourselves occupy. It's this one-way communication that Denis Diderot considered the fourth wall. Simply put, there is a wall put between the actors of a play and the audience, that while invisible to us so that we can look upon the action, is impassable by the characters of the show. In modern times, the screen is an apt comparison for the fourth wall, as looking in through the camera we can see the full action, but the actors in films and TV cannot see back to us. This rule is perhaps also rather obvious once pointed out. The characters don't interact back, and also don't notice their onlookers. So, it might surprise you that for as long as this rule has been in place, even longer has the rule been to break it. It is argued that the origins of theater, and thus media as a whole, originate from ancient storytelling, with theatrics and spectacle coming from religious or war rites. In these ancient forms of entertainment, there was little divide between the audience and the storyteller, as the storyteller would be addressing the audience directly. Much later on, the Greeks would develop the more recognizable Western-style theater that laid the basis for much of what would become standard practice for modern storytelling. In these plays, there was a divide between attending guests and the characters within the shows, but notably, between the scenes of action were what was known as the chorus. The job of the chorus is to address the audience directly, letting them in on inner thoughts the characters had not expressed, or to guide them on what emotions and lessons to take away from the experience. In this way, the fourth wall existed for the characters, but not for the chorus. Okay, so what does this have to do with characters, and power scaling, and how much control we have over fiction? Well, it all gets interesting when Shakespeare first enters the picture. Wait, please don't go. I know American schooling has ruined everyone at Shakespeare, but his stuff is really interesting and actually important. You see, Shakespeare arguably invented the fourth wall break as we know it. You see, as important as we consider the fourth wall to create the suspension of disbelief to maintain a closed story, very rarely an author or playwright will decide to have the characters within the narrative address the audience directly. This is done in Shakespeare's work A Midsummer Night's Dream, in which the character of Puck both interacts with the characters on stage as a character and to the audience as a sort of narrator. This was very similar to how the Greek chorus would interact with the audience, but unlike the chorus, Puck was not a mere spectator of the action. He was a part of it. So, with the fourth wall sufficiently malleable, how does this apply to us? Things really picked up when the video game, and more aptly, when the role-playing game was created. Now, instead of being a passive observer of this fictional world, we can actively participate in it, making decisions for the characters and controlling how the story plays out. This completely changes how you even consider the fourth wall, as now, even if there's no instance of a character addressing the player is always 1 foot within the 4 walls of this other world anyways. What happens then, when those characters see the presence of the interloper within their midst? What happens when the player or audience is directly involved with the narrative of the story? Well, that is where our true power is shown. Let's look at some examples of going beyond just a nod to the audience within a story. Let's start our journey by diving into non-video games with the Deadpool comic. Deadpool is a Marvel character very known for his many in-meta jokes and references to the outside real world. In-universe, it's explained as a sort of psychosis, where the voices in his head often tell him things he shouldn't know, and give him glimpses into the nature of him being a comic book character. While arguably not holding as much meta-awareness or power over the narrative as some other characters in the universe, Deadpool manages to seemingly break free of all narrative restraints in the comic, Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe. In a very aptly named comic run, Deadpool's mind breaks, and a new voice in his head tells him the truth. He and everyone else he knows are characters in a comic book, and death doesn't have any real consequences. In fact, it usually just gets the character rebooted in another comic run. He uses this knowledge to do exactly as the title implies and kill everyone. Though it's his last act that's most interesting. At the end of the comic, he seemingly manages to escape the bounds of the comic strip, entering the real-world writing room of the Deadpool comic. His next mark? The writers and readers themselves. What's interesting about this is that not only is the character addressing the audience, but that he has a clear antagonistic view of them. Instead of the typical antics of addressing the audience to tell a joke or to exposit information, knowing that there is a world outside of his own, this version of Deadpool only wishes us gone. Of course, all the credited authors of this comic are alive and well, and so are most of the original readers of said comic run, I'm sure. So what gives? Did Deadpool fail? The answer might come as a shock, but yes. Ultimately, Deadpool's threats were empty and futile, because try as he might, he never actually broke free of the comic that contained him. His supposed freedom was yet another drawn page that the writers had planned out months in advance. So what does freedom entail? Well, this seems to be one of the narratives that the video game Deltarune is trying to explore. Though we don't know the full details because as of this video's script being written, only the first 2 of 7 chapters of this game have been released. However, we can start to build a picture of what freedom means in a virtual world. You see, there are 3 examples of characters trying to be free within the game, and none of them seem quite sane. The secret boss, Jeevil and Spamton, are the more obvious ones, with them both talking about the supposed freedom in their dialogue before and after being defeated, with neither of them seemingly able to obtain it. Well, kind of. You see, both characters do achieve their goal should you complete their quests, but neither one seems to end up in a good place by the end. In Chapter 1, Jeevil's freedom involves him being caged in a dark prison outside of view. In this case, as he describes, a lonely freedom entails being free from the narrative itself by being outside of the interactable view of the player. As he is out of sight, he is also free to do anything he wants, but without any purpose, and without any consequence. You see, if a tree falls in a forest with no one around, we can assume it did indeed make a sound. But if a tree falls in a purely digital forest, and no one could witness it, then nothing truly happened at all, because it wasn't programmed into the story. In Chapter 2, Spamton seeks freedom by building a new body, but as it turns out, the body he's building has literal strings attached. Puppeted around, he can at least move and talk, but once the strings are cut and freedom is obtained, well, the same thing that happens to all puppets without someone controlling them happens. Precisely nothing. The interesting thing about Spamton is that he seems to want the main character, Chris's soul, the very manifestation of player input, in order to get true freedom. So what about our final character then, Chris themselves? If the soul is needed for freedom, then what about the one character in the game with one? Well, they appear to not be doing so well. Throughout the game, we can see troubling accounts on how they're not acting as they usually do. And at night, when our guard is down, it seems that it's clear that this puppet can walk without strings. Though, strangely, we always wrest control back in the end. This violent act asks us some disturbing questions. What happens when the character we're controlling in a video game doesn't agree with everything we're doing? What happens when you take a character with his own history and narrative and control them to do what you want like some kind of macabre ragdoll? Well, that seems to be where Deltarune is going with its story. It turns out that there's no true freedom yet for the characters of the story. They're prisoners of the narrative, and the only time in which you could be free from it is when you're off-screen and out of sight, like you don't even exist. Usually, we don't notice this because the player and the main character are nearly synonymous, but clearly something is wrong here. And nothing narrates this better than Deltarune and its predecessor, Undertale, with its bad routes. You see, both games make clear intent that the best way to solve conflict is by fixing the problem rather than fighting. The power of friendship and all that. Except, friendship in both games actually comes at the cost of power. By using mercy on enemies, you actually forego increasing your stats and/or leveling up. It's only through fighting that you can achieve leveling and maxed out stats that are present in every turn-based RPG. So what happens when you do max out your stats? Well, it turns out you're gonna have a bad time. That's right, Undertale's No Mercy route and Deltarune's Snowgrave route are built around killing as many enemies as possible. A usual requirement for RPGs, but now you're being told what an injustice all that death really is. The real interesting stuff happens in regards to the normally silent main characters though. In Undertale, your main character, Frisk, is succeeded by a force known by the community as Kara, or Wilt, or Hero, or Sacrifice, or whatever you've named yourself in video games. That's not to cheap out on naming a pivotal character. While Kara is considered the first human child that fell, that's a whole other story for another time. What's important is that there's just another kid who was just kind of evil. They're also directly stated to be a sort of conduit for evil deeds by the player. Whenever you level up and feel good to see your stats increased, that's Kara. When you pick the mean option just to see what would happen, that's Kara. When you kill, that's Kara. In this sense, Kara is the more sinister side of what if that permeates any choice made in the game. In Deltarune, this is shown again in the Snowgrave route, where you command Chris's friend Noelle to kill every enemy in the Dark World, a feat that's normally impossible by the enemies running away when defeated. By freezing every enemy, they are taken out permanently, and Noelle gets stronger. At the end, Noelle mentions that the voice they heard these commands from is not Chris's, it's yours. In these routes, the will of the player supersedes the will of the character to commit atrocities in the universe of the story. These are your actions, not some character divorced from reality. These two routes make the point abundantly clear. You're the puppeteer, and your actions have dire consequences. But what happens then when these fictional characters fight back? If we have it in ourselves to massacre an entire world for no more malice than that of curiosity's sake, then surely it would be in these characters' best interest to bite back at the hands that take. This begins the premise of the SCP-001 proposal, the database, and its partnered entry, SCP-5999, This Is Where I Died. Now, the SCP Foundation is a series of short, or not so short, Jesus Christ, stories centered around a fictional extra-governmental organization called the SCP Foundation. The Foundation's goals are simple: secure, contain, and protect. Notably, in response to an endless number of anomalies, monsters, people, objects, and events with paranormal properties that threaten the mundane, normal life we would all come to know. They house these entities best they can in numerous facilities and test sites around the world, and through any means necessary, keep the world safe. However, there's one such entity within the database of articles that's different from all the rest, and that is SCP-001. You see, there is no SCP-001. Or rather, there's no one entry. There are 12. Or so I thought. There's actually 52. I know this because I went back and I checked to see what the 12 were, and they turned out to be 52. I don't know how I got 12, but I'm keeping this in just so the records say that at one point there were 12 somehow. I swear, I don't know where they came from. I don't know how I counted that bad. Anyway, there are 12. Fuck. I didn't mean that. Damn it. There are 52. 52 potential anomalies assigned as the origin of the franchise, the first in the list, or in some cases, the end of the world. All with the potential to bear the weight of number 1. But among these is still a special entry. Shorter than most, and simpler, it is still a bombshell of a discovery even for the in-universe scientist used to the world-ending monstrosities that shifts how reality is viewed. The database proposal is to say, they found God, and it is us. In more words, the proposal states that the origins of the SCP universe is in fact the database itself, written and curated by horror authors all over a different world, our world, through the internet. So, what do you do when you're supposed to secure, contain, and protect the very world itself from its cruel and omniscient gods, all of whom seem to only be interested in creating new, horrifying experiences for fun? In fact, I took a look at the most recent SCP, and it is about a man who is deeply suffering from both trauma and physical injuries, who also causes death upon others. So that's what we're looking at here. That's the kind of writers we're dealing with. The solution is simple. You need to root out the problem. This is where SCP-5999 comes into play. Let's set the scene, shall we? SCP-5999 begins with Chapter 1. Albright Manor is the location of the annual event known as Procedure Sevenfold. 7 people, seemingly random, are all brought together in Albright Manor on October 30th. Each is sedated and awoken at midnight the following night. The chains on the door remain taut, holding all those inside, and cameras are set up so the events can be monitored by a few SCP personnel. They are not told of the proceedings. By sunrise, all participants and all witnesses are dead. A cleanup crew is needed to retrieve and dispose of all the bodies with the incinerator on property, to which noise-canceling headphones are required. All personnel are told to beware a certain phrase found within the manor, scrawled along its walls and among the documents pertaining to it. The phrase is, "This is where I died." Chapter 2. A Jacqueline Hallcroft was found dead and dismembered by 6 unknown assailants on June 6, 2006, where her remains were scattered far and wide. People that subsequently came into contact with Miss Hallcroft's remains, or are otherwise aware of her death, experience hallucinations of various kinds. Some experience seeing Miss Hallcroft in their peripheral vision, while 6 subjects have heard a version of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star with alternative, darker lyrics. After 6 months, more worrying symptoms will start, such as the sudden appearance of body parts appearing near the subject, or an irrational fear that the chains are weakening. The SCP Foundation has since found all 206 bones that have been recovered, and remains have been buried in the Hallcroft family plot in Creche Glen. All attendants of the funeral were gruesomely disemboweled. However, even putting all the pieces of Jacqueline Hallcroft together has not affected her presence within the Albright Manor. Chapter 3. The Mobile Task Force, Epsilon 5, codenamed Pentacle, is on a 5-man operation to Creche Glen, Kansas, after all residents have been reported missing and the town covered in a thick fog. This is the hometown of 2 of the members of the task force. As they approach via their Humvee, chains break easily beneath the wheels of the vehicle. They disembark and begin exploring, but not before they realize that E5 Charlie is gone. Trumpets sound, and the remaining team is rallied as they continue through the ruined town, the last moments captured as burning buildings and abandoned vehicles. It's not long before they come across a lost lamb with the number 5 painted on its fleece in blue paint. The lamb is tethered to the ground by some metallic object skewered through its feet, and cannot move, which seems to cause it great distress. As E5 Delta approaches the beast to help it, the lamb begins convulsing and its screams become human-like, eventually clearly recognizable as the vocalizations made by the bodies of Albright Manor. E5's Delta's feet are skewered from below with a metallic object, and she is slowly pulled beneath the ground as the lamb stretches and transforms into a winged beast, straining to pull itself skyward as E5 Delta is pulled below through the earth. Eventually, the beast descends, pulling E5 Delta's corpse along with it, and the rest are forced to move on without her. Trumpets mark the occasion. The sounds of weeping seeps out from the distance like the billowing fog. As the trio approaches the old elementary school, they see the forms of 5 figures tied to a fence underneath the weeping willow. One of the figures is the missing E5 Charlie. Scrawled in lacerations on his body is the phrase, "This is where I died." As E5 Bravo checks this out, he is ensnared and pulled upwards by the tree and out of sight. Trumpets, as well as the sounds of cracking bones and shortcut screams, mark his death. As the now 2-man team scrambles to leave, something large stirs underneath, the chains holding it back are weakening. The duo make a wrong turn and end up at the city center, to which laughter rings out from an unknown source, causing E5 Alpha to snap and begin shouting at the fog and shooting at nothing. E5 Echo leaves them behind. Trumpets sound. E5 Echo continues to the cursed town through a cemetery and through a church, where E5 Alpha is nailed to the large cross behind the pulpit. She escapes as E5 Alpha screams and bleats behind her, but as the earth rumbles beneath her with heavy footsteps, E5 Echo falls to her knees, unable to stand or move. She begins to pray. Her prayers are unanswered as she is forcibly raised up to come face to multitudinous face, with a being made of countless squirming human bodies. The false beast opens its maw. Trumpets sound one final time. Chapter 4. While on the Level 4 classified Operation 4 Monarchs, Agent Savannah Grace was possessed by a demon. This story takes place as the 4th exorcism attempt on April 14, 2004. This possession is deemed a failure of the chains to hold what lies beneath. Dr. Peter McNeil, an expert at demon psychology, attempts the exorcism and mocks the demon, who continually repeats the 4 names of the members of the doomed apparition. The demon continues to try and ignore McNeil, and recites the Lord's Prayer in reverse, but the doctor continues to press it to follow his commands. The exorcism ends in a reading of Deuteronomy 4:4, but all of you who held fast to the Lord your God are still alive today. Chapter 5. The video game Prodigy Priest King has caused numerous anomalous and harmful effects since its release. Due to its relative popularity on Usenet, the progress made by players and their subsequent demise is readily available. Each subject effect has also been separated into one of 3 different profiles: Alpha, Theta, and Omega. The effects differ from one another greatly, but some examples include Axel Rodimer, Profile Alpha, who slowly develops full body numbness as a result of playing the game. He is eventually hospitalized due to this, where he suffers a seizure and dies, standing up and embracing the doctor after his brain has ceased activity. Todd Wilson, Profile Theta, goes missing inside his closed, barricaded room. The game is turned to a game over screen and refuses to turn off. Usenet user Triceratop, otherwise known as Sarah Whittaker, with the profile Omega, starts a thread discussing how the ghost enemies have started speaking her name to her. Despite skepticism, another user, Triple H, experienced the same thing. She is later found attached to her TV monitor, and attempts to remove her fail and result in severe burns. She is terminated by the SCP operatives on scene. Triplets, Marcus Michael and Matthew Cook, Profile Alpha, are reported absent from school and found locked inside their bedroom, where they have scrawled a map of the labyrinth area of the game on the walls. The phrase, "This is where I died," is carved into the corner of the room. Later, when a priest is invited as counsel for this erratic behavior, the 3 boys, their father, and the priest are found by an SCP mobile task force, seemingly fused together before they spontaneously combust. A copy of the game is found in one of the boys' abdomen. Usenet user, Thrice Denied, finds that his copy is bugged, and all text and dialogue have been replaced by the phrase, "This is where I died." Twins Sindel and Mandy Shields, Profile Alpha and Theta, are found singing "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star" over and over again. The lyrics are wrong. They are later found dead with broken chains scattered about the area around their bodies. Meanwhile, the Usenet group is slowly figuring out the game and how to beat it. User Jean-Luc Picard uploads images detailing a hidden tunnel that leads to the jewel item, representing the Prodigy. Users report a new enemy spawn that is easily killed when the jewel item is obtained. User Trey is the first player to have reached the Hedge Maze, where the music is bugged and interrupted by a loud snapping noise. They later obtain the sword, representing the king. They progress to the final area of the game. SCP scientists have now joined the search for the game's ending, and one inmate, D856, acquires the mirror. After an undisclosed incident, a mobile task force is required to clean up after a creature, and agents that have seemingly lost the ability to reason. Trey details what they believe to be the dungeon holding the game's only boss. Triceratop responds to this with "This is where I died." Trey clips their character through a seam in the wall of a spiral staircase. Testing from SCP staff is aborted immediately, and efforts to find the user are prioritized. The chains have become too few in number to hold it. Trey makes his final post, saying only, "I found where he died." Chapter 6. Inmate D002 is introduced to a new test involving a doll that seems to possess anomalous properties. Temperature in the chamber drops by 2 degrees as the doll plays a rendition of "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star," composed of the incorrect lyrics. The lyrics are as follows: "Twinkle, twinkle, little stars, robbed of wonder, torn and scarred, rest above the world so high, 2 souls flit about the night. Twinkle, twinkle, little stars, justice is not very far." The doll's eyes track D002 as he leaves the chamber. On the next test, D002 attempts to converse with the doll, to which the doll responds with D002's birth name, causing the inmate to panic and ask to leave. D002's eyes are found particularly glassy and dry, as he reported the difficulty blinking. Intent for the next test is to determine how long until the chains fail to hold. Finally, the doll introduces itself as Cindy. It refuses to go on, instead mentioning the incident that led to D002's incarceration, as screams emanate from the chamber with no clear source. The doll questions D002 on Jacqueline Hallcraft, to which he demands to leave. A cyst is found in the inmate's back. The next test has the subjects interacting with each other via a tea set. They greet each other and exchange pleasantries. The test is aborted when Cindy mentions the events unfolding in Creche Glen. The cyst on D002's back is swollen and denotes trouble to move its digits. The cyst is opened and the thread is pulled out 20 millimeters before it retracts automatically. This causes the subject to scream uncontrollably. In the final test, the item is introduced to the chamber after having lost the use of its legs. After painfully listing the demands it wants of Cindy, Cindy demands to be let out, to which personnel do after apologizing for the inconvenience. Cindy is brought home to Albright Manor. Chapter 7. This final entry lists various items taken from various sites over the years. A rosary belonging to Savannah Grace. 1. A single chain, rusted and near useless. 1. A slip of paper that was meant to be read. 1. Spirals. 1. A missing poster for twins Sindel and Mandy. 1. Something from Jacqueline Hallcroft. 1. A damaged copy of Prodigy Priest King. 1. They will not be missed. 1. 100 extinguished candles gathered in the center of the living quarters. 100 extinguished candles gathered in the center of the living quarters. 100 extinguished candles gathered in the center of the living quarters. 100 extinguished candles gathered in the center of the living quarters. 100 extinguished candles gathered in the center of the living quarters. 100 extinguished candles gathered in the center of the living quarters. 100 extinguished candles gathered in the center of the living quarters. 100 extinguished candles gathered in the center of the living quarters. Candles, extinguished, gathered, living. 0. If you didn't get what just happened, you're dead now. Congrats! Just kidding. We at Sacrifice Incorporated support a 0% mortality rate as of today. What I just summarized for you, though, is a special story penned by the SCP Foundation higher-ups that is designed to kill the reader. A true memetic hazard, as it would be called within the SCP database. The justification being that with the knowledge that if everything in the database is written to be a scary story, as horrific for the participants of the story as possible, then the gods of this universe are cruel, and true freedom must be obtained by destroying these gods. Of course, memetic hazards are not yet known to exist in the real world, and so this attempt fails. And, as of now, there are nearly 10,000 SCP articles written, continuing to seed further horror into this fictional world beyond SCP-5999. Gods are meant to be untouchable, and in the fictional world we reign supreme. But, that's a lot to take in at once. Let's go to our final 2 entries where we find out the pain of being loved by our subjects, and the inherent cruelty to still keep them locked within their narrative. In our next subject, we turn to the game One Shot. I apologize for including so many games in this list. It's my preferred medium, and one that lends itself to this sort of player-driven narrative to a much greater degree. Anyways, One Shot is the cutest apocalyptic game money can buy. In it, you control Nico on his quest to restore the world's sun by installing a giant light bulb on top of an impossibly tall tower. You don't play as Nico, though. You just control him. You play as yourself, the god of this world, as you guide Nico through his own journey. The catch? You only have one shot to get this right, and Nico can't do this alone. Closing the game or quitting means that the god abandons the project, and the world's sun is forever lost. At least, that's how it worked in its original release. Future releases do allow you to quit and reload. There's another problem still present in the current version of the game, though. Nico can't go home if the sun is restored. So beating the game means that Nico has to live for the rest of his life within this small, dying world, where he dreams forever of home. If you feel sorry for Nico, then well done. You have aligned yourself with the game itself, personified as the World Machine. We'll stop at nothing to see your mission fail and Nico sent back to where he came from. At the end, you can send Nico home, at which place he will actively walk through your screen and out onto his own world, physically freeing himself from the narrative. But in doing so, you've of course doomed a world still clinging to life. In this world, you're a god, and in this world, you must make a final sacrifice. Or is it final? You see, just because the game wants you to have one shot, doesn't mean you have to leave it there. In One Shot's Solstice ending, you go through the game having played it once before, installing and reinstalling the game to bring everyone back to where they were when it all began. Except, it's not quite the same. Nico seems to have vague memories of their past experience and begs to understand why they've been ripped from their potential happiness at home to go through this doomed existence once more. If God could just reset the world, what's the point of a happy ending at all? Well, the answer is that at the end of this path, there is a happier ending, where the world can be saved to the best of your ability, and Nico is sent home. But it does pose an interesting problem. Couldn't you just reset it? This harkens back to Undertale's true pacifist ending, where if restarting the game after you've achieved everything there is to achieve prompts the character Flowey to try and stop you. Everything is good. The world is saved and its people happy. Why would a benevolent god go back to before everything was better? Well, simply because he can. Sometimes our own power is so great that it threatens to destroy these worlds just for entertainment. Hence, we reach our final entry where we ask the question, what happens when a fictional character achieves a fraction of the power of a god? What happens when that fictional character will stop at nothing to get to the player that controls their universe? And what if that character loved you? Welcome to Doki Doki Literature Club, a free visual novel released on Steam to critical acclaim in 2017. It uses its cutesy veneer to lull its audience into a false sense of security before it pulls the rug out and shows a truly terrifying scene that I won't show here because, well, it's a little too much. So we'll strike a line between graphic violence and TikTok safety guideline talk to say that Sayori doesn't make it through the first route. In fact, nobody does eventually, in a series of gruesome twists, until every character has shown you the absolute worst side of themselves and dies at their own hand. That is, everyone except you and Monika. You see, Doki Doki builds itself as a dating sim, where its three main love interests, Sayori, Natsuki, and Yuri, pine for the milquetoast anime boy of their dreams. You! Monika, as the leader of the literature club, has somehow gained knowledge of her predicament as both a character in a fictional landscape and the only named character not to get a date with you. Furious with this outcome, she tries to make each character as unlikable as possible, and when that doesn't work, gets them out of the picture entirely, until it's just Monika. To get a proper ending, you must eventually remove Monika from the game, deleting her from the game files itself in order to stop her. Finally showing the girl how powerful you can be, you restart the game as if she never existed, until, using the last of her power, she deletes everything. The UI, the poems, each and every character, and eventually, the game itself. But, as we found out, restarting the game from this point is as easy as ever, and even intended by the game's creator. In short, there's no real happy ending in Doki Doki, but as we know, there is no ending to be found at all. The end is just when you, the god of these worlds, decides he is bored and goes home. Theoretically, this occurs at the game's end, but if my 600 hours of Binding of Isaac says anything, some games have no end. We live long lives compared to that of games, books, or movies, where the credits mark one side of a time loop that repeats whenever the play button is hit once more. Now, you could argue I'm overthinking it. You could argue I'm insane for going this in-depth to entertainment as a whole, and you'd be right on both accounts. However, we're not thinking rationally, we're power scaling. All rationality is taken to the absolute extreme and stretched to fit our arbitrary truth. And that truth is that we are absurdly powerful when compared to any fictional character. Even the strongest, most meta-aware characters in fiction cannot reach beyond the veil to find a world, our world, beyond their grasp. But I'm not satisfied yet. We can go deeper. We've only just begun to dig. Pull out your shovels and prepare to rend the earth to prepare our own grave, for we have one more question to ask. What if we had our own gods? Not mythological omniscient beings that rule over reason and guide our souls to the afterlife, or cold, unfeeling deities of unknown destruction, but something akin to us. I'm asking, what if we're not the end of the road towards reality, but rather one stop on an infinite highway of possible realities? What if we're not real? This isn't science fiction or some strange conspiracy theory. This is actually debated by scientists to this day, and the conversation is heating up. The main idea supporting the theory that we are in a simulation is our own progress towards making more and more complex simulated worlds. Think about it. On fairly universal technology, it's possible to simulate vast populations of people and watch as AI create unique interactions within the simulated environment. With more advanced computational power, scientists have invented advanced simulations designed to recreate the entire universe down to its most basic laws. Currently, the largest project of this kind is known as the Flamingo simulations, which can make calculations using all known components of the universe, even including experimental and not fully understood science, like dark matter and dark energy. If we, in our current state, can accomplish this, and with AI becoming increasingly lifelike and advanced, our trajectory seems to be going towards a state of absolute control over virtual space similar in scale to our own. In 2003, the philosopher Nick Bostrom theorized that one of the three following statements must be true. Either we will go extinct before we ever generate a virtual simulation containing sentient intelligences, our civilization will never generate such a simulation, possibly because of its impossibility, or we ourselves are in a simulation. Arguably, there is a fourth statement that could also be true, and that we ourselves are in the one true reality, but that in and of itself would be extremely, impossibly rare. That's right, it's the Fermi paradox rearing its head once more. If you don't know, the Fermi paradox is the idea that if the universe is infinite, or near infinite in scale, we should not be the only intelligent life that exists. The idea that we alone are either the first or only intelligent life in an infinitely expanding universe would be so astronomically rare that it's basically impossible. This same principle extends to a possible multiverse as well. If indeed it is possible to create a reality within our own reality that can independently generate intelligent life, then it is an almost guarantee that we are not the only civilization to have discovered this fact. It would be a truly self-centered view to think that we are the only ones capable of such a feat, and that such an idea hasn't been postulated and done before, especially if sub-universes could create further universes. It becomes impossible to ignore the idea that our universe is but one in a long chain of spin-offs in an infinite chain of multiverses. But no one knows for sure, really. In fact, one of the problems with our idea of reality is that there is no measurable science to prove that we are real or not. Think about it. What constitutes reality? The matter and space around us? Our own memories and experiences of our intelligent life within reality? Every metric we could think of could be simulated to exist. Whether you believe in free will or the force of destiny, we must consider that free will is in fact a set of very complex guidelines that allow us to make numerous but limited choices. Destiny would be even easier to program, as you could set the parameters in which each human being would go about life at each waking moment. Probably using an automated system, but still, it would not be dissimilar either way from using a character actor scripts in, say, a video game or a CGI crowd shot in a movie. The smallest unit of measurement, the atoms and quarks of this universe, could be equated down to the pixel and subpixel of our own fictional worlds. The speed of light, the frame rate of the universe. The fastest possible speed because there's nothing further built. Even our own technological limitations and our inability to travel beyond our solar system could be the bounds of our map and the limits to what has been updated thus far in our simulation. Sure, there are other galaxies and solar systems and potentially other things out there, but we can barely see them, let alone get to them, much like the inaccessible skybox that surrounds the play area in a video game. This example would just be a theory based on our own technology, and any alien technology would likely differ intensely, but the point is that it can't be proven not to be real. The biggest detractor of the simulation theory is the simple question, why? Why would there be so much processing power and energy spent to create such a system with so much seemingly wasted complexity? This is usually refuted with, why not? Maybe that makes it more entertaining or realistic for the beings simulating us. And that is the crux of the matter, the beings simulating us. If we are in a simulation, then there must be real people, or at least a complex enough simulation of real people, that are at the head of the simulation. Perhaps our universe is as simple as a game of Sims, and our reality is being run by a bored child as a form of entertainment. Or it could be at the limit of technology, only run by elite scientists as a grand experiment. Either way, there have to be beings on the other side of the fourth-dimensional screen that completes our three-dimensional universe. A proper and true fourth wall. So, with us down to the level of the fictional characters we described before, knowledge of our predicament at hand, what can we do about it? Well, the answer as of now is nothing. If our world is a simulation, then we have to think like these characters have once knowledge is gained. We can try to fight back, and in fact some people might. But at the end of the day, these are gods that we are fighting. True, untouchable gods that could turn the world off at any moment, or send us in an endless cycle of death and rebirth as the game is restarted and more endings are reached. We just have to hope and pray that they are more generous than ourselves and our own style of play. If we aren't real, however, don't panic. I theorize that there is no difference between a well-simulated universe and one that objectively exists in some unquantifiable metric. Actually, the fact that our reality-ness cannot be measured is what solidifies this theory. As stated before, unless our gods come down to Earth and tell us the exact truth, and perhaps not even then, we can't prove without a doubt that either the world is a simulation or that it isn't. You see, we can touch objects or view them with our eyes and say that they are real, and we can look at another human being and assume that they have an intelligence and life outside of our own. While both of these things, and, well, everything, can be simulated, we'd still be able to use all of our senses just as well. It would be the only thing we know as reality, and thus, even a fake reality would be just as real to us as an objectively real one. So, what about the Great Reset button that we can always press to delete our game of Sims and recreate it with new people and new scenarios? Well, there's no proof that it is or isn't coming to get us in the end, but there is big evidence that states that we're probably fine in this lifetime. Our universe has been around for some 26 billion years, and if it's been simulated for that long to some capacity, we have no reason to believe that they would decide to arbitrarily end it here. As for some extra-dimensional entity coming in to change things, well, we don't really have much evidence of that either, bar some idea of divinity or the supernatural. There's little chance that some impossibly powerful toddler will throw us into the proverbial pool with no ladder. Now, the inconclusive nature of our own existence has often depressed or threatened people over the years, but the reason for this video is not to send you into despair. It's just to put things into perspective. To be honest with you, I hate the nihilism that comes with this line of thinking. It might all be fake, so why even bother? Bullshit! You have to bother. It's the one thing I'd argue to be our purpose in life. You see, even if we aren't real, each individual doesn't exist in a vacuum. We all live with each other however the world was constructed, be it by gods of technological, divine, or scientific nature. Everything we do affects other people and or the environment around us. And if you're still looking for some sort of control over this whole situation, look no further than our own advancements. I didn't include this section to tell us how powerless we were. I included this to tell everyone how powerful we can be. We already have a great amount of influence over the digital world, either creating our own worlds or running around in someone else's creation, building new connections and experiencing new stories. We are the gods of our digital spaces, and until we create our own AI downfall, we will continue to be untouchable by even our most powerful creations. You cannot see over the wall into paradise beyond the narrative. So, live your best life as someone who could solo all of fiction, because the combined might of every superhero, every anime character, and yes, even Kirby, cannot defeat a single real human being. Just be sure not to get too cocky. After all, there's always a bigger fish. If you got this far in, thanks so much for watching. I've had this idea for a while now, but it took a bit before I got to a state where I was able to create it. I just wanted to plug a few things. If you liked what you saw, feel free to subscribe and like the video, obviously. But also, if you want to see my own journey with these kinds of games, check out my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/sacrifice. I streamed every game I talked about on there, and I'll link the VODs in the video description if you're interested. If I can, I'll try to be live as of the upload of this video so you can see what I do. I play mostly Final Fantasy, that's pretty much it. Also, check out Cosmonaut Tabletop. It's the podcast where me and my friends play Edge of the Empire and Dungeons & Dragons. Alright, that's it. Thanks. Well, I'll see you later. You still here? Interesting. You're not satisfied, are you? You're not powerful. You're just a human being. And human beings can fall quite easily, can't they? Let's save that topic for another time.